Hey there. Welcome to a live inside the Radiantly Alive Woman. We are here inside our women's only Facebook community where we are talking all about scars. So thank you for being here and joining me for this very interesting conversation around piercings. If you are brand new to the group or you're watching through another social media platform, inside the Radiantly Alive Facebook group, we're a group of women interested in scars, and we have a discussion board or a kind of announcement at the top of our Facebook page where we have women writing scars that they're interested in learning about. And piercings came up as an area of interest, which I am also very curious and always interested about. So I'm going to shed some light on the importance of piercings as they relate to scars, as scars relate to our own energy, fatigue, depletion, physical considerations, energetic, emotional kind of stuff. And then most importantly, how we can start working with our scars, which are piercings. I was looking, I always write notes for these, and I was looking at the list of the amount of places that women can have scars. Fix my crazy hair here. And piercings can kind of be everywhere, especially nowadays. I've noticed that piercings are not just in our nose or our ears or nipple. They're kind of on our skin, back of the neck. They're kind of all over the place. So I'm going to try to grab as much as I can. But if you have a particular piercing that you're interested about, just write it in the chat. It's best if you're live watching this because you can ask me and receive your response very quickly in this kind of back and forth format. But if you're also watching on a replay, no worries. Just type it in and I will respond as best I can, as quickly as I can. And if it deserves its own live, that's my kind of offering to women. If it deserves its own live, I will do it. So let's get into the topic around piercings here. So every single time in my videos, we go through those three considerations, like I said: physical considerations, energetic and emotional, and then what to do. So the physical stuff I always start with because it's the easiest for us to understand, and it's also right in front of us as a tangible thing. So it's a very grounded place to begin. And then we move into areas that are just as meaningful, sometimes more important depending on the scar, but a little bit more abstract and a little bit more potentially subtle. So that we want to talk about, and that is always included. And then what to do is huge. Okay, great. That's a really good one. Old tongue piercings. I'm going to just write that on there and just capital letters so I talk about that because that's a really good one. I hadn't put that on my list, so thank you. There's so many places we get piercings. So just to toss it out, piercings, I have a list here. We got on the face, all kinds of places that we can have piercings on the face. Eyebrows, nose, all over the nose, mouth, lip, tongue, ears. I'm sure many other places, as I'm sure you've seen just in the world, you can get all sorts of different piercings all over your body, which include, like I said, I've noticed people are getting them on the back of their neck and on their chest. Obviously, we're aware of nipple piercings, and then belly button is another massive one that we'll talk about, and then piercing on your genitals, in your whole kind of vaginal pubic area. And I don't really think that people pierce stuff on their legs. However, that is fair game as well. I just don't know about it, and maybe I don't see their legs because they're wearing pants. I'm not really sure. So let's just think about this as generally as I can. And yeah, write out the piercings you're interested in. I will definitely touch on tongue. I'm going to go over a few principles. Because this is spanning a huge area, we need to kind of think globally. We need to think big picture. And I'm going to kind of weave in and out of my standard physical and energetic because these two realms fit really close when we're talking about piercings. So in the physical, which let's just call Western science for lack of a better term, I want you to think about the considerations of electrical nervous tissue. The way that our body communicates with itself at incredibly fast, efficient rates is through the nervous system. The nervous system is pretty much electricity. Your heart is run almost exclusively on electricity. Your body, you can think of it as, in a neurological sense, as like this highway of electrical conduction going from everywhere, tip to tail, as fast as it can. That's how we move our muscles. Nerves talking to muscle fibers that allow a twitch or a contraction to happen. So that I want you to take into consideration, because when we're talking about different types of piercing substance like sterling silver or other types of piercing stuff, I know that there's a big like nickel-free world going on right now, but I want you to think about just the metals and what that does to electrical conductivity. So there's been a thing that's gone around for quite a while, and I think it's been quite heavily researched in countries where it's more normal to not wear a bra. Like right now, I'm in the US in North America, it's pretty standard to wear a bra. But when you go into more European countries where they're a little bit more open to the idea that you can be braless, I think we're going in that direction, but it's not really a thing yet. There's been a lot of research in the impact that wiring has on your heart. So underwire bras, heart. That kind of close proximity is something I want you to think about, not just with your bra, but also with the piercings, like where they are in relation to big conductors. Obviously, your face, your head, your neck, that is a center of massive amount of highly important nervous function. So we have 12 cranial nerves that are literally coming from our brain and our brainstem that are coming out like through our skull, and they help us a lot with sight, help us a lot with hearing, with balance, with taste, smell, all of these like big sense kind of organ things. That's all happening from nerves that are coming from our brain. So also just thinking about the closeness that these areas could have, like the relationship that these things have with the proximity of this like big, as we like to call it, we like to call our brain as like the central hub, like the computer. And so let's think about that as an area of importance, just to keep it on your back burner as a thought for physical, or like Western science, as I was just calling it. Then let's just take the same idea of electrical conductivity and think about it in a more Eastern traditional sense. So I'm talking about yoga, specifically Ayurveda, which is the ancient Indian style of medicine, and then Chinese medicine, which is the ancient style of Chinese medicine. There's also Tibetan medicine. There's just all of that Eastern tradition. They have mapped out the body in pretty similar ways as having, again, these energetic channels. These channels of energy that some are superficial, meaning like laying close to the surface of the skin, and some are more deep and on the inside. So I also want you to think about that in relationship to where your piercing is. So just for an example, because the face is kind of obvious, because I think we see mostly we see face piercings as like the first thing that we see when we're talking to people or seeing them. I want you to think about where the Chinese medicine channels are on your face in relation to those channels. So if you were to Google, something that's really easy to Google is if you look up the 24-hour Chinese medicine clock. I have a really good picture if anyone wants to see it. It just outlines everything so pretty and beautifully. Maybe I'll put it at the bottom of this video after I get off here. And you can see where the channels are running. So for example, the bladder channel has a really important kind of connection towards like the eyes and like the inner part of the eyebrows here. There's all kinds of other channels that are kind of running into here. There's all kinds of channels that are running like up the neck. There's a lot to think about, and I want you, thank you, Chris, making me blush. I want you to also think about in Chinese medicine that the ear, they have mapped out, from what I understand, they've mapped out the whole body on the ear. So if you look up at acupuncture, like a Chinese acupuncture ear map, you'll see like your whole body mapped out on these tiny little spots along the ear. So all different types of ear piercings are potentially being influenced or influencing these parts of your body. So it's really important that you just become curious about these meridians. The Chinese medicine acupuncture meridians are really easy to see They're really well documented, and they're an easy Google search. Ayurveda is a little bit trickier. We call them nadis, or these energetic channels that are a little bit harder to find, like concrete, proper education around where they are. But I want you to just think that there are superficial and deep energetic channels as well that run through the limbs, the legs, through the torso, and they're of course all over and in the center of your head. So just keeping that in mind as well. And this brings me to an important principle that I wanted to highlight as far as the physical considerations of your piercing. This is just an overarching kind of view. I want you to think about this principle not only for piercings, but just kind of carrying through everywhere. Because when I work with people in my programs, I recognize that we get really stuck in what we think what we need is what we need to have forever. And why I'm bringing this up here as a principle, the principle being that what we need today is not what we need forever. What we need today is something very specific. And if we're really skilled at awareness practices, monitoring and managing our energy, really good at our food and nutrition, we'll know where we're at right now today. Then we'll also have a respect and an understanding that where we are in 3 months from now, 6 months, a year, 5, 10 years is going to be very different. So when we have scars, when we have piercings that are in an area for a long time, they could be good at a certain point. There's lots of people who have piercings for medicinal kind of reasons. They got it pierced for a particular reason for that moment in time that will be obviously so different, because if we adopt this truth and we kind of start living by this truth that is so much more obvious and easy to run with as a woman, that we're continually in flux. We're always in process. And so we need to adopt that idea and live from that idea, not just by tweaking our food, but also being aware of, when it's good to rest and when it's good to do exercise. Also, when it's good to have a piercing in, if you're having it for a specific reason, and maybe when we don't need that piercing anymore. So I want you to just kind of think about that as an overall thing. If you have a piercing in for the whole of your life, it may not be the best kind of thing to have it in all the time, which is a really good idea when we're talking about old piercings. I'm going to talk about old piercings and the impact that they have, because an old piercing is a hole that was once open through your body somewhere that has then therefore closed. And we need to talk about that and how to work that. Luckily, piercings, the scarring that's involved in general, is kind of, it's a lot less than say a large abdominal surgery, like a C-section or a breast reduction surgery, a thyroid surgery. They're much smaller in size, but we still need to take it into consideration on how to work with it, because some of the areas that we are getting pierced, like tongues, like breasts, genitals, they're an area that we want to have integrated back in fully and completely. So that's a little spotlight on that principle there. Let me just make sure I'm getting all this stuff in. I wrote a lot of notes for today. So just another thing about a physical consideration. When we're talking about scars in general, I want you to always consider the depth of tissue. I have brought this up a few different times, but it's so important. The depth at which your scar is embedded is very significant. So, for example, if you had a little scratch, say you just brushed up against something and it skinned your skin, that's a very superficial wound. It probably won't scar. Maybe it scars a little bit. If you have a deeper embedded wound that is much deeper, the influence is a lot more. It's impacting not only the area, but it's starting to impact all of the neighboring tissue, all the muscle around it, the organs, the nervous system, the circulatory system. It is now impacting how everything else is communicating with itself. So when we're talking about things that like go right through the skin, like an ear or a nose or a tongue, breasts. You want to think about how deep this is actually going through the tissue. Tongue, for example, I mean, that's a pretty good amount of stuff to go through. And interestingly enough, Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, they use the tongue as one of their central methods of diagnosis of illness and disease. So they can pick up, which I find amazing, they can pick up, where you're deficient in your body, where you have excess in your body, where you're running yourself down, what part of your body is more optimal and what area of your body is struggling. They can grab a lot of that information just by the visual of the tongue. So when you have a scar, like an old tongue piercing, that could be impacting first of all, the way that your tongue is actually, the way that your tongue is moving and articulating, but it also could be impacting how people are picking up information from your tongue. And it could also be working in like that exchange relationship. So if your tongue is off, then the related area of the body could be off. That would be something that you'd want to be curious about and be interested in. Because the tongue from like day to day can look very different in its quality based on your health. Whether you ate a certain way, whether you got a certain amount of sleep, if you did this or that. There's all of these different things that influence the shape and the quality and the color and the like level of muck of like a film that's on the tongue. So the tongue is an incredibly important area and factor for health. So the superficial and deep thing is a really important area that I want you to think about, where your piercing is, how deep it is, and where it actually is in relation to electrical conductivity, but also the electrical conductivity that's happening because of the energy channels that have been traced out and confirmed for thousands and thousands of years. We don't want to forget about those because they must be right if they're still providing incredible health benefits. Something is working there 100%. What else can we go into here? Okay, so actually let me just read Chaitanya's message. So she's saying, I'm aware of all of that, and it's one of the reasons I'm so fascinated, and I've always wondered what effect the scarring might have. Yeah, that's a good question. If you Google like a tongue map and you kind of compare the mapping from Chinese medicine to Ayurveda, I would be interested to know like where it actually lines up with your tongue scar, your piercing scar. That would be really intriguing to me. And if that resonates for, what you feel in your own body and your day-to-day experience. Yeah, awesome. First time on the name. Good, I'm glad. Okay, so let's talk about some things that I want you to think about in relation to the scar as far as the healing process of a piercing. So depending on where your piercing was, a lot of the time the body is cool with that piercing, or it can handle it, or it's not so okay with it and it tries to push it out. Like it's almost like the body, it is the body rejecting that piercing. We need to be aware of that because oftentimes we're not really thinking like very full picture when the body's rejecting it, and we just go, oh, we got to do that again. It didn't work that time. I got to do it again. And that is accurate. The body did not accept that, but we do want to think about why. Why not? There's someone who wrote in something really powerful about having a really good awareness of the piercing was potentially causing cancer, and having it removed and feeling like a blockage was just like weight lifted off of her shoulders. This is a very high awareness to have. Most people don't have this awareness. And so we want to be aware, like when the piercing is healing, like after we've just had it, we want to be aware of infection. We also want to be aware of that rejection. Okay. And if we do it more than once, we want to be really hyper aware of if it's like continually rejecting. Back in the day, belly button piercings were like all the rage. all the girl pop band singers had it, and it was something that a lot of women were just going after. And I'm sure it was like cool at another period as well. So there's a lot of women who've had belly button piercings, and they're oftentimes rejected. They're often like pushed out by the body once or maybe twice or even more than that. And we want to stay attuned to that. And I was telling someone a story on the page about when I first started studying neurology in this kind of context. They were bringing up how bad piercings in the belly button are for feeling and connecting to your core. Because in this central axis here, so central meaning like the nose, the mouth, the sternum, belly button, genitals, this whole central axis, there's a electrical channel that they've mapped out in Chinese medicine. It's also there in Ayurveda, so it must be there if multiple cultures spanning thousands of years are both tracing the same thing. We don't necessarily want to have this piercing here, and in particular the belly button is a very like primordial place. It is like literally your connection, or was, to your mother. And when we started first learning about this neurology area as it relates to not having the core function, I learned further on, even like more in depth into my training, that this area was one of the best ways that we can communicate with the electrical system. We were doing like a specific method where we would like stick our fingers in our belly buttons and like check to see like how well our electrical energetic channels were functioning. And like 100% of the time, people who had belly button piercings, or even old belly button piercings where the scars have not been worked accurately, they were really struggling with connection to their core, really struggling with feeling like they had stability in their low back, feeling like they felt that sense of integratedness where you feel sturdy and solid in your body. So belly button piercings in general should be on your radar for potentially bugging up your energetic channels, bugging up your muscular core for actually engaging and providing you the support and like adaptability that you require as a human being as you just move about life. If you've ever had an abdominal surgery, I was just talking to a friend who just recently had an abdominal surgery, and like her overall feeling in the moment was, oh my gosh, I used my core for so much I had no idea. And so you want to just have that on your radar, that there may be something impeded there, because that's something you can work on, something you absolutely can work on. All right, so more from Chaitanya. Let's read. I like that you're here and commenting. It's really helpful. Thank you. I do have an existing fully healed belly button piercing that was rejected once or twice before sticking. I do struggle with blockages in my root and sacral chakras. Might this have a correlation? Or so you're referring to a physical connection to the core. I've also had 2 abdominal surgeries, and I feel it has negatively affected my body in many ways. Yeah, so that's a good segue. I think I'm pretty much done my physical here. Let's go into that kind of energetic mode. So we've been dancing and talking about Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, energetic channels and connections. But yeah, let's also talk about let's talk about chakras. So I am like a traditionally trained, or I am training in traditional yoga and meditation. So I have a slightly different perspective to what a lot of people are talking about in reference to chakras. But nonetheless, we are on the same page that they are these energy centers. One is at the root, exactly like you said, like one is at the base of the pelvic floor. That one I was talking about in the pelvic floor video about vaginal scarring. It's so important for women to be connected and, feel into that energy center and really kind of enhance that energy center. If it's not functioning optimally, if we've got emotional blockages in there, physical blockages in there, we want to change, we want to affect change in that area. And then the second one up from that is the sacral chakra, and it is kind of like deep inside your pelvis. So I'm touching here, but I don't actually mean like the surface of my body. There's an energy center, there, but the chakra itself is deep inside the body. And it's also very important for women. It's our area of emotionality, of the water element, of sensuality, of sexuality, of emotion. It's a huge place that we want to be tapped into and be aware of. And yeah, I'm always a big person, like if you start tracing stuff out, like where these piercings are, where these scars are, like if you're talking about abdominal surgeries as well, in relation to like the vector. So I'm doing this with my body here. So if you have scarring here, you will have impact usually at the backside of your body, because that vector of challenge or strain is going straight in and disturbing the stuff around it, your gut, your bladder, your uterus, your energy, your feeling in connection to emotionality, your feeling in connection to yourself as a woman, and all that stuff that I had just spoken about before. So I am totally talking physical, but in my world, as you probably have noticed if you've watched a lot of my videos, I'm so big on the physical as well as the energetic, because at the end of the day, it's really hard to pull them apart. We can't just say that we have a musculature abdominal wall problem. We have that, which means we also have this, and it goes both ways. We have this, which means it also must mean that we have this problem. They're kind of in relation. Let me just make sure I asked your question. Yes. So I absolutely think that they do have a correlation. I would assume that they would have a correlation. And then just on like the emotional and energetic topics, I always am thinking about the scar in these 3 different phases. So I'm talking about the before, the during, and the after. So in relation to piercings, it's potentially a much lower, like elevated version of what I'm about to talk about, but it could still be present for you. So what was the reason for getting the piercing? Was it for a specific medicinal, reason? Did you want it for some sort of healing thing? Or did you want it because you felt like you needed to have it to, for lack of a better word, to be cool? Or because you thought that you needed it to kind of encapsulate your identity with this, if I get a nose ring, I look this way. Or if I get a belly button piercing, I look this way. Am I following the trend? Am I doing the thing where I'm following, the movement of social media and of all of that? Yeah, you know what I mean? Be cool. Was that the reason? And then so you want to really get a hold of that. You really want to understand yourself in that way, because it could be seen like really insignificant because it's a piercing, but when you start to think about it and you trace it through your life, you could realize and notice that this is a pattern where you're making these decisions a lot. And that over a period of your life can end up giving you a feeling of being very lost or detached from who you are in the center of it all. So that's something to just think about. Now, that's the before. The during is during the piercing itself. Piercings in general, they have a whole range. How it feels to pierce your ear, I'm sure it feels very different to piercing your tongue. It feels very different to piercing your genitals, belly button, nipples. I think that they have a whole different spectrum of pain, and each person will be different with that experience. So think about that as the during. Like, how much pain was there? What was the reason for it? Like, you really kind of aligned with your intention to be cool, for lack of a better term, and that felt good. Whatever it was, that was the during. Then you want to think about after. After will include the healing process. Lots of piercings, depending on where they are, don't really go so well as far as a healing process. That makes the scar more stuck, more rigid. We need to pay more attention to that. And then a lot of people get their piercings removed. So let's talk about the removing of the piercing part. Because like I said, a lot of piercings are just very trendy. They go through phases. Maybe we get them taken out because we're just so sick of them not sticking in. Maybe we get them taken out for whatever other reason. We just want to talk about that and like the actual filling in of the scar. So let me just make sure I've gotten all the things. So I think that that's all I really wanted to highlight as far as like a piercing itself. So up until this point, we've kind of spoken about piercings that are piercings that are still in your body, and how that choice of metal or whatever it is that's in your body, how it could be impacting, and the location of just like the depth of tissue that it's taken, as well as the healing process. But let's talk about when you actually take the piercing out, what happens. Yeah, so lots of people will be like super into their piercings and then it will die out. I think this is kind of a normal-ish trend that happens. So again, depending on where the piercing is, the hole will matter more or less. Like I said, the hole in general will be much smaller than most surgeries. And we're choosing to do it in areas that are not, like we're not piercing through our muscle tissue, for example. What we are piercing through is connective tissue. Sometimes we're piercing through cartilage, which is like nose and ears. Your nose and your ears, weirdly enough, as far as I understand, just keep growing. Like they just keep like growing in size as we age as well. It's like one of the only things on our like physical body that we can see that continues to grow, other than like, you know, our nails and our hair. So the potential ability for that area to self correct, like self-resolve, is probably a lot higher. The person that I spoke about, the woman who messaged earlier, she said as soon as she took her nose piercing off, she felt like a blockage was lifted, and that felt so much better. I could see how this is very accurate for cartilage-like areas. In areas that we're not piercing, that's cartilage, which is pretty much all the other ones except for the ears and the nose. We want to actually apply like some sort of scar-like method. You can still do it with the nose and the ears. It will not hurt to just go in there and be thorough and explore and be curious and work that all the way through. But as far as all the other places, we do actually need to apply a method, because we do think that the closing in, as soon as there's a hole in the body, the closing in of something will be with scar tissue. Scar tissue, like I said, is very dense. It's very fibrotic. If you were to open up a definition of scar tissue in a medical textbook, they're going to say it's inert, meaning it is dead, meaning it doesn't get a lot of blood supply, which means we need to actively like push blood supply in the area and actively input stuff like hand manipulation, movement, breathing to make the tissue less fibrotic. We need to do all of this stuff, which is actually very easy and can change the scar tissue, the filling in, quite quickly, quite simply. If you don't do anything to your body, like if you don't move it in a certain way, it will get rigid, it will get fibrotic, the tissue will get dense, you'll have less range of motion as like a general thing. As soon as you start putting an input, like a stimulus into your body goes, oh, that thing's there. Let's do something with that. and depending on what kind of stimulus you're doing, you're immediately like driving attention, you're driving functionality, you're driving nourishment, you're driving all the stuff to the area so that it can change. But if you don't do anything, it won't change. I feel like that's like a rule across the board. You know what I mean? So that's what I want to talk about as far as filling the piercings that are filled in. We need to actually apply a scar tissue manipulation. This third part that I want to talk about, what to do, is where we're at now. I say the exact same thing every single time for every scar. So you still need to do this step. Even if you like heard me talking and you had already kind of assumed that it's not such a big deal because it's just your ear, whatever, I still want you to go through this series of steps, because you may find that there actually is something there, particularly in the emotional and energetic side, that you may not have counted for. We go through so much of society, like so much of our life, being told that, you know, just put your head down and it's okay. Or it's fine because this person said so. But actually, if you hang back and you feel into your own experience, it may be a big deal. And a lot of the time, things that happened when we were little, we discredit ourselves and say, like, I was just a kid, like, you know, I was just being silly. But in the deep kind of heart of you, in like that pit, there is still a lot of pain. Like the 5-year-old you is still really upset about that. And so you want to honor that. You want to go into that. You want to be aware of that. Whether it was just getting your ears pierced, there may be something in there. So what are these steps that I'm talking about? For every single scar on your body, you do this. You apply the same thing. You sit or lay somewhere comfortable, like your bedroom or a place in your house where you feel really comfortable, and you're gonna make skin to skin contact with the scar. In this example, the piercing, and you're gonna close your eyes. Okay, so you don't need to do anything crazy. You're just gonna make contact with the scar. Let's just say I have pierced my chest here, because I see that. That's a piercing that's quite common these days. You're going to make contact with it, close your eyes, be comfortable, relax, and grab two different qualities for me. The physicality. Physicality means numbness, altered sensation, high sensitivity, aversion, feeling nauseous, feeling icky, feeling something, whatever it is, grabbing the physicality, temperature differences, hot, cold, whatever. And you also want to grab the feeling of it, the ropiness, feeling of tension, bound up, areas where the scar is like pulled out of the body, areas where the scar is like, going in and latching and anchoring into the body, grabbing as much physical stuff as you can. Then the last part, the third part, is I want you to go into these three phases I spoke about as regards to emotion and energy before the piercing, during the actual piercing experience itself, and then after. What did you feel? Like, what was your predominant emotion before? It could be, I got my belly button pierced when I was really young, and I felt like I needed to do it to be cool, and I felt a lot of pressure, and it's not really what I wanted, but I feel like I couldn't really hang out with my girlfriends at the time if I didn't have it. Okay, it could be something like that, just as a total example. Then you want to grab the during. You're afraid, you're scared. Lots of us get piercings when we're a little bit younger, or people seeming to get piercings, like I said, just all the time now in all of these really interesting places. So regardless, there's going to be a little bit of I don't know what this is going to feel like. I'm a bit freaked out. There's a little bit of fear there, and maybe some other stuff. You want to grab that information, those qualities, that energetic kind of imprint. And then the after. Feel into the after stage as, a variety of different things. The healing process, the rejection, the maybe lack of consideration of what your body was trying to tell you when it was pushing out. Maybe just getting the piercing and then realizing this happens a lot, and your own kind of realization as you, I'm sure, have gone through life where you do the thing and then you have the thing and then you realize oh man, I still feel I don't really still feel like I fit in. I still don't feel like I'm running with my girlfriends and they really appreciate me. Something's still amiss here. So feeling into that in this kind of piercing example I'm offering, feeling into that as an after. Once you've grabbed all of that information, you've given yourself the actual time to absorb and feel into this. You've actually, gotten information and you're aware of the potential kind of transformation that could happen because of the piercing. Then I'm going to give you the what to do specifically only for piercings, okay? This is only for piercings. I'm telling you this is only for piercings because of the method that we're using, and I'm choosing this method because of the size of the piercing, and because in general, piercings are not really high on the trauma list. They could be, but they're potentially not as overwhelming emotionally, and they're very likely putting on a lot less strain than a larger scar, like I said before. So this method, just do it for piercings. Don't take this method and do it somewhere else where you have a different type of scar, okay? You're going to take a pinching, pulling, and rolling, I guess you could say, technique, okay? So we want to unglue scar tissue from whatever it is that it's glued onto. It likes to anchor onto stuff that's solid bone. So depending on where your piercing is, there may or may not be bone present. Bone here, super obvious, right there, big, huge frontal bone. Belly button, not so obvious. Tongue, not so obvious. So you want to think about what it is that it's anchoring onto, like how far is it been burying to try to find those solid pieces of your skull, solid pieces of your anatomy, hip bones, whatever. You want to pull the tissue. How can I do this? Arm. You're going to pull the tissue up. So pulling it away from the bone or away from whatever you can envision it headed towards is like a vector of Spider-Man's webs or wads of gum. You want to pull it up and away. And don't squeeze, don't like pinch like you're going to leave a really red mark here, but just pull the tissue up and away. And then you're going to roll the skin between your fingers, okay? And then after a period of time, you're going to let go. And then you're going to pull it up again, maybe the exact same direction. It'd probably be beneficial to do the exact same direction between 1 and 5 times. Then you could pull it up, the same bit of skin, but just slightly in a different direction. So instead of going straight up, I'm going to go forward towards my camera, okay, which is just in that direction, pinching. Sorry, I don't want to give you the glare of my watch. Pinching, rolling, okay? 1 to 5 times. Go in the other direction, pinching, rolling 1 to 5 times, all right? If you're doing your tongue, tongues are slippery. So you got to put something on your tongue and probably on your fingers to allow for that to happen. What we want to do is we want this to bring circulation to the area. We want it to start to pull away from the stuff that it's stuck onto. We want to start bringing awareness into the area so the body starts to go, oh yeah, I got that. I kind of forgot about that area, but now it's on my radar because you're pulling it around. So I can start to bring nourishment and circulation and activity and all of these different processes that can help to flush out that scar tissue. So that's just one of the things that you're going to need to do. You're not trying to pinch the scar and damage. You're not trying to squeeze it like crazy. You're just trying to pull it up. If you squeeze too hard, just like if you were trying to strip muscle too intensely, you lose the potential benefit of the lymphatic system. You don't want to crush your vessels. You want to keep a somewhat of a soft, pressure on there so that you can allow for movement in your roll, but also allow the lymphatic system and the circulatory system to come in and out. It's really important that you come up and then down, and then up and then down. Because again, you're facilitating a natural pumping action by actually mechanically changing the surface of the skin. Yeah? If you were to just keep it up and just roll around, you're just kind of stretching your skin, and over time it's going to hurt. We're not looking for hurt. We're looking for really specific change, precision change in the area. So I think that's all I have to say about piercings, which was a really kind of fun practice. I talk about piercings all the time in an individual setting. I'll always have a belly button piercing conversation, or I'll always have a piercing conversation about the face with a specific client. But this video is really nice because I had to think about all the areas as it relates to, we were spoken about, the energy centers, the energetic channels, the electrical conductivity of our nervous system, how close the different scars are in relation to bone and their anchoring point. We got to think about all of this in a really kind of cool way, which was really nice. So thank you for being so active in this video. It's so much better when you guys are in here and chatting with me, because it directs the flow of the conversation, and I can directly answer, and this video becomes much more rich and full with information. So thank you to everyone who did that. I really appreciate it. If there's any other questions, now's your chance. Pop them out. Yeah, you're so welcome. If you start working on them, so, obviously I'm telling you this information because it's super helpful to know where to go. But then it's really nice to have a direction of what you can actually do. I find so much on social media and stuff, you get all the information, and then they kind of pull away the action from you, and you're left with just some really cool info. So I always want to give the action, like what you can do. So as you start working these things, like the piercings, but anything else, as you start going through them, ask questions, because stuff's going to come up. They're scars. They're a big deal. We just don't know it yet. So please use that as a resource. I'm particularly doing that inside this group because I know there's so much education and knowledge and wisdom and stuff, but nobody's telling you how to do the thing. And like, for me, it was really frustrating, and I wanted to change that dynamic. So yeah, let me know how it goes. And thank you so much, Sarah Jane, for coming. And yeah, it's nice. A lot of us have had so many piercings, so I'm curious to see how this goes. We can keep this chat going inside this video, and I'm really looking forward to that. So I will leave it there. I'll see you this week again. There's going to be one more live, and like I said, ask questions, chat on here. It was really nice to have all of you, and I will see you soon. Bye.